Good morning and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we're interviewing Mr. Frank Altman, a social entrepreneur who also specializes in nonprofit and entrepreneurship development and is the president and CEO of the Community Reinvestment Fund, a national nonprofit organization founded in 1988 that empowers people to improve their lives and strengthen their communities through innovative financial solutions.
Mr. Altman, thank you for giving us your time. It is a privilege and we're truly honored to be speaking with you today. My name is Suresh Shasti, and I'm the senior at Homedale High School, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots.
My name is Raul Kuru. I'm a sophomore at St. Paul School and the president of CompanyRoots. Before the interview, we just want to thank you for taking your time. The first question that we always ask is, what are your own roots and how did they help you get into CRF?
Well, what are my roots? I'm a native of Minnesota, and I grew up in a very religious family, and was always taught that it's important to leave the world a better place than what you found. When I was in high school, about your age, my dad had a terrible stroke, and we were just about lost our house. And I learned a lot of self-drive at that point. My mother sat down one day with me. She said, if you want to go to college, you got to get a scholarship. It's up to you. Yeah. So I really just focused. During my junior year of high school, I got involved in something called the Young World Development, which was an effort that was sponsored by the American Freedom from Hunger Foundation. And Young World Development sponsored the International Walk for Development on May 8th and 9th in 1970. And I got very involved in that. That was high school students like you that were put together basically to create and run a fundraising effort that was focused on development, both domestically and internationally. And we funded, I think, 10 nonprofit organizations with proceeds of the walk.
Wow.
This really was the first international walk for development ever, and was one of the first walks to raise money, charitable money, anywhere in the world.
Right.
So I got hooked on development from that effort, and hooked on understanding what the development process was like, and went to college and was fortunate to get into Brown University, and I took advantage of the Brown curriculum, which allowed for an interdisciplinary major. I majored in public policy and devoted my life to public service.
Yeah. So you graduated from Brown and then the University of Minnesota with the public policy education. And so you're also an active advisor right now to their social innovative initiative at Brown University. So how has your education helped you to lead CRF to become what it is right now? And then also right now, how has it affected how you guide the college students in that initiative?
Well, I think there's two things. There's education, which equips you to learn and never stop learning. And then there's what you learn on the job and in your career. And so while I went to school for public policy and have been very active in the public policy arena for my entire career, I learned the skills of finance on the job.
Yeah.
I started my career at the Minnesota Housing and Finance Agency in 1976, I think. And then, just progressed upward, learning how finance works, how the capital markets work.
Yeah.
And said, maybe there's a way I can apply this knowledge to a social betterment. So,
yeah.
At Brown, I think Brown teaches, or at least has an environment of entrepreneurship and individual efficacy, and the willingness to take risk. Brown allows you to take risk without destroying your career. And so I did take risk. I took a lot of risk at Brown. I learned how I could do that, and learned that risk taking is very important to social change.
Right.
And that if you can understand how to mitigate risk, but still take it, that's important. I think that Brown has an entrepreneurial environment, and so moving to the Social Innovation Fellowship, which was named in memory of my late wife, Leslie, really, I think that social innovation, that innovation is not necessarily a for-profit enterprise.
Right.
And that if social entrepreneurs can think like entrepreneurs and in a business, sort of a business framework,
Yeah.
they can make a huge difference. And so
Right.
we helped us. I'm on the advisory board that selects fellows, and we usually select one fellow in the Leslie Miller Altman Fellowship, and then we stay with that fellow, sort of what they're doing and so forth.
And work on developing their own
Right.
career.
But frankly, it's Brown that does that, and we're standing behind the faculty at the Swear Center that really is involved in working with students on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So CRF has injected more than $2.4 billion to stimulate job creation, economic development, and support community facilities. So commanding that amount of capital is amazing. And how do you and your team choose what projects to invest in? And how are you presented with these ideas? Do you make them, or do other people pitch them?
Well, first of all, it's important to know that what we're primarily doing is amassing and driving capital toward debt financing. So
Right.
businesses that are borrowing money, nonprofits that are borrowing money.
Yeah.
And I think the secret to our success has been to build a network of like-minded, mission-driven organizations around the country that are on the ground in communities and don't necessarily have access to the amount of capital they want to lend.
Yeah.
So our first approach was to actually create a secondary market for these organizations and buy their loans for cash, so they could get that cash back on the street faster. It's increasing the velocity of a dollar is really important part of our effort. So if you've got a dollar that's tied up in a 10-year loan, and it's going to take you 3 years to get enough money back from that loan to lend to the next borrower.
Right.
If we can buy that loan from you today, you put that money right back in the street, you can serve 10 borrowers during that period of time as opposed to 3. So that was very successful. We started off with a proof of concept. You might say now in today's language, a minimum viable product. And once we proved that, then we were able to raise primarily philanthropic capital to allow us then to leverage the capital markets by taking the risk, de-risking the investments, by aggregating the loans into pools, and then ultimately placing those pools with investors through a securitization structure, asset-backed securities. That went really well, and as we kept growing it and iterating and getting it to be bigger and better, we were able to bring in S&P, Standard & Poor's, rated those securities, and now they could be purchased by insurance companies and pension funds and others that would never be able to purchase an unrated security. So we were broadening the market, and then the crash came in 2008. So that put a stop to that effort for quite some time. We're back into the market a little bit, but not the same way. So we pivoted. But before that, I guess I have to say, to link the finance and the public policy together, we became very involved in the late 90s with a coalition of community development organizations, so some of our community partners and others that wanted to get a federal tax credit to induce investments into community development loan funds. This is before the term Community Development Financial Institution was around, and we worked for like 3 or 4 years and on a bill in Congress, and never got very far. And then in 2000, after the 2000 election, President Clinton sort of held the last card in the last bill that was signed after the election, or that was passed by Congress, and said it's time for us to go to the areas that are being left behind, or the new markets, and we created the New Markets Tax Credit.
Right.
That tax credit has been a big part of the deployment that we've made of the 2.5 billion or nearly 2.5 billion that we've deployed. And being at the nexus of policy, I was the first president of the New Markets Coalition I was at the White House when President Clinton signed the bill.
Wow.
Exciting time in my life. But that's been more exciting is to see how much has happened with that credit over the last almost 20 years.
Yeah.
More than $50 billion in direct investments and hundreds of billions of dollars in investments in the most distressed areas of the country.
Yeah.
So understanding the system and then seeing where you can have an impact through public policy and advocacy is really important. And so that's been a big part of what we've done.
Yeah.
And then after the crash, we were able to get back into the capital markets by acquiring a non-bank small business loan company that's regulated directly by the SBA, U.S. Small Business Administration. And with that, we were able to start making business loans during a very risky period of time and being able to get an outlet for those loans because they were guaranteed.
Yeah.
And now we're just under $300 million in small business loans, largest nonprofit SBA lender in the country. And we're really trying to scale that business along with the other things that we're trying to do.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy because the social impact and impact investing field has only really become a thing within the past few decades. So you guys were conceived in 1988, making you pioneers of the field. And, as you just spoke about, like from, the 90s to now, I feel like I was going through like a U.S. history course from like last year. But like, you're actually like one of the people that was making the policies. So how would you say that you've really shaped the other people in the field as well, like outside of CRF?
Well, I think, first of all, it is, you find like-minded people out there in the world. So it's not just me or CRF. There's a whole bunch of people that are involved in investments, that were involved in investments back then, that were seeking to do more or not to do harm with their investments. And so if you think about the movements that were going on in the late 80s and early 90s around divestment in South Africa and to try to focus on using investment strategies or prohibiting investment into companies that were doing business in South Africa, and some other cases, SIM businesses and so forth. There was a movement out there that was much bigger than CRF,
Right.
but we were kindred spirits, and I kept saying what we need to have, in addition to ethical investing, we need to have alternative products that people can invest in.
Yeah.
Because there won't be social investments if there's an investment vehicle for social investors or impact investors to invest in. So creating these asset-backed securities was a big part of trying to say, well, if you want to have people put their money where their mouth is, they got to have a way of doing that. And
Yeah.
that's what we created. That's part of the innovative financial solutions. That's part of our mission. And then I was elected in the mid, I guess it was 2007, maybe. My first meeting was in 2008. I was elected to the board of what was they called the Social Investment Forum.
Yeah.
Which is an organization now called US SIF that brings together practitioners in a wide variety of practitioners in the field of impact investing, and the terms of ESG, environmental, social, and governance, as an analytical tool really were pioneered by many of the people in that who are members of that organization. And so it starts to fit together. And then the momentum was further established when the Rockefeller Foundation said, we're going to go into this in a big way, and started their global impact investing network and really changed the tune from social investing to impact investing, which to me is investing intentionally for social impact.
Yeah.
So it's not, it could be screening, but it's more than screening things out. It's intentionally investing for things that are going to improve the climate, improve the way that stakeholders are treated, including low-income community residents, and improve the governance of these organizations. So it's been fun to be part of that movement from the beginning.
Right. Next fall, I'm actually attending Wharton at UPenn, and I'm looking to focus on social impact and responsibility. So I was writing all of these college essays, kind of exploring like how I would want to do that myself. I did a lot of like research into the history behind it. So obviously 2 decades ago, it wasn't even there. And now it's this thing that people are going to college to major for, minor in.
Right.
So it's actually growing. And for me, like, I didn't know, initially I knew I wanted to apply to the school, but I didn't know in what way, whether it was like management or finance. So, finding that concentration and, I did a lot of research into things like ESG and some of the early players in the whole social impact, field. So
Right.
that stuff is all kind of connecting right now.
Right. Yeah, good. I mean, you think about Calvert funds were one of the first mutual funds to really try to create a socially motivated set of family of funds.
Yeah.
They were an early purchaser of our securities, so it all kind of fits together.
Yeah.
But we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
So, and we need a lot of skilled people in the field that go to Wharton and figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
So CRF currently invests in several small businesses. So how are you guys looking to create a long-term ripple effect in communities across the nation? So
interesting question. Our theory of change is that we need to build this. It's a complex theory, obviously, but by bringing capital to capital-starved communities and getting that capital to create and grow small businesses, although we're not exclusively focused on small businesses. We also do nonprofit facilities. We do charter schools. I kind of look at the pillars of a vital place: good education, stable housing, economic well-being, jobs, ability to accumulate wealth by owning a home, by owning a business. All those things are really important. That's how we build a middle class. And many communities around our country, one or more or all of those elements are challenged. So we try to focus where we can be most beneficial and where we have the tools to do that. And for years, we focused on affordable multifamily housing, and we've done hundreds of millions of dollars worth of financing there. Job creating small businesses and high impact community facilities, which include high performing charter schools, community health centers, daycare facilities, a variety of early education facilities that bring kind of the important infrastructure into a community so that residents can thrive.
Yeah.
We really recently have been focusing on trying to get capital to flow into businesses that have the hardest time accessing capital, and those are businesses generally owned by women and people of color. And so we've had a growing emphasis on this. We look at the SBA because we're now part of that system. SBA is lucky to get 3% of its capital to flow into businesses owned by African American entrepreneurs. We are doing much better than that. We're at about 20%, and we're still trying to grow that. If you look across women, people of color, and veterans, which kind of fall into that same category, about 80% of our businesses are in one of those categories. So that's been a focus. And then increasingly, we're focused on growing what I would say is community wealth. So entrepreneurs have a business and begin to grow their wealth. They show others that it's possible. We need to get behind models that people can look at and say that could be me down the road, and really try to help break this cycle, I would say, of entrepreneurs trying to grow their businesses only using debt and not being able to rely on wealthy friends and family,
right,
or wealthy networks because they don't have them. And so we're saying, how can we play a role with our debt products? And we're looking right now at an equity product that play the role kind of the surrogate rich aunt or uncle, if you think about that. So that there's an opportunity for that kind of capital to come in that's really patient and that can help the business grow. We're looking at that in the context of opportunity zones, which are now part of the tax code, although we're looking at a bit more broadly than that. So
so I'm sure that you're also aware of like the threat against local retailers and small businesses by several of the larger e-commerce companies right now, like Amazon, Blue Apron, Instacart. So are you guys looking to continue to grow small community businesses against like e-commerce retailers?
We don't have a lot of retail borrowers in our portfolio for one reason or another. We do have some. So I think, let me put it this way. We know that the economy is changing at warp speed around us. And technology is going to be part of everything that we have in our life, unless we have a catastrophe.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that we're trying to do is to help businesses become more technology savvy, because if you're not using technology to your advantage, you're going to be crushed by competition who is.
Right.
And then we're also looking at technology. How can technology be introduced into our whole industry? There are more than 1,000 community development financial institutions now. Many of them are small and not highly technology enabled. So we have initiatives to try to bring technology to digitize the CDFI world. But with respect to the retail juggernaut of the e-commerce, we're not really heavily involved in that. Where we are involved is trying to get those e-commerce companies to fund other activities that support the network of small businesses that we and others are working with.
Right.
So for how do you envision CRF to be in the next year? Like, what ideas and goals do you guys have? And how do you envision CRF also to be in 10 years?
Well, we have a 10-year big, hairy, audacious goal of being able to finance $1 billion worth of projects a year.
Wow.
And with and at least 1 million people a year. Now that's an aspiration. You can measure progress toward it. We're slowly making progress, but it hinges on a couple of things. It hinges on us being able to continue getting new markets tax credit allocations, which are dependent on Congress reauthorizing the bill every year, and so or reauthorizing the tax credit. So a lot of the work there is focused on advocacy in Washington and working through the New Markets Coalition and others. This year we had a victory. The tax credit was extended for 1 year, but it increased from 3.5 billion to 5 billion. So there's a larger pie to draw from, and we hope to be able to use that. We are the largest issuer of something called CDFI guaranteed bonds, and we're issuing those bonds, lending the money to other community development financial institutions. That's a program that we're trying to build up to $500 million to $1 billion a year, and CRF would be part of that. We're not the only lender, but we're clearly the largest. We're not sure yet where we're going to land on opportunity zones, but we think that there's a role for opportunity zones in our field. And there, we're talking about investing in existing operating businesses that have been starved for capital located in zones and helping them grow, rather than doing real estate. Although, the jury's still out on whether we're going to be able to do that, just because of the complexities of that tax provision. So aspirationally, we want to get to $1 billion a year in financing across all those platforms, as well as we see CRF being a high-performing node on the network of lenders with a large contract loan servicing operation to service loans, help smaller CDFIs with their streamline and make their collections and loans payment processing more efficient. We're doing that already now. We have about 60 organizations and $1.5 billion in loans that we're servicing on behalf of others.
Crazy.
What's going on right now in the economy is going to be a challenge. We don't know what's going to happen. We went through the crash. It was painful.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to figure out, well, if we go through another huge economic downturn and our staff is homesick, what's going to happen there. That's a challenge facing everybody right now. So
definitely. So there's also one more thing I wanted to ask in terms of, so you're a CEO right now, and you choose what projects you want to attack and how you want to attack them. So mainly you go through financing and tax brackets, but do you ever see CRF expanding to other countries maybe where you can work through their legal systems as well?
We've been asked a few times. I think it's really, and we haven't said yes, although we've gone to conferences. So we've spoken about our model and how we mitigate risk by building off of philanthropic support and government support, but it's primarily philanthropic that allows us to take risk and to build a balance sheet that can support that risk. And then borrowing money directly from socially motivated investors. And we do that. And then how we then leverage capital markets. Really what I would say are return first investors, but they have a social component to their investment thesis. So people are trying to learn from us. I was in Kigali, Rwanda 2 years ago at a very interesting conference, and I know that some of the NGOs that were there from all over Africa are trying to use this model.
Yeah.
We have some corporate investors that are international, and they're saying maybe we could bring it to other areas where we have an interest. We're not there yet. I think the U.S. is a big place, and we are still a speck in the ocean, if you will, in terms of what kind of impact we could have here.
Right. Also, one more thing is that for the people going into college who are interested in social impact and responsibility, whether or not it's their major or not, how do you recommend they pursue working in that field and kind of building to where you are right now?
Well, I think there's different ways of looking at it, but I think that we need a tremendous number of social entrepreneurs. And by that, I mean people who are willing to take their entrepreneurial spirit and the tools of entrepreneurship and apply it to an intractable social problem.
Right.
And I would advise, even though we're kind of broad, because we're looking at finance as across a number of different issues, to try to really focus in on a defined problem that you can actually impact with a social venture. Whether it's for-profit or nonprofit is kind of up to the business model. Looking back at starting CRF 30 some years ago, the idea of social entrepreneurship there wasn't a word for it.
Right, and now it's this thing.
Yeah, and what you sort of just went to was, let's create a nonprofit. Right?
Yeah.
Because nonprofits can get money from philanthropy and so forth. In our my experience, it might have been better to really have a social venture and raise equity capital from like-minded investors. I don't know if we could have done that 30 years ago, because the philanthropic world is very constraining, and sometimes you're not able to use the capital in the way you think will be most effective, because the foundation has another. It's overlapping, but the foundation has another interest.
Right.
So I've been encouraging people that are thinking about social entrepreneurship to see whether a for-profit model would work, whether a public benefit corporation structure might be advantageous to bringing in the kind of capital you need for your business, and then being able to really document impact, because that's the currency of impact investing.
Yeah,
it's not just financial return. It's, are you moving the needle?
Right.
Yeah. So we always end the interview off on the same question. What advice would you give to the current generation of high school students that would like to make a positive impact on society, including solving a multitude of problems that make people's lives better? And how would you recommend they start this process?
Well, the first thing is you got to get a good education, which I think you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I think that I think it's really important when you're in college or just coming out of college to recognize that the biggest asset you have is your future. It's not, you're not probably going to come out of college with $1 million in your pocket. You're probably going to come out of college with a couple $100,000 in debt, which is another issue. But when you're young, you have the ability to take risk and to lose.
Yeah.
Right? You have time to make it back. And so don't be too conservative about your aspirations to create the change you're seeking. Take risks, understand how to manage them. That's important. So understanding, really studying what risk management is, and risk taking, and risk and reward, and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
People say oftentimes, well, you could go to work at Goldman Sachs. Why are you doing this? Well, you're young enough to actually
take that,
bet your career on it. And if it's a career error, you have time to change. If it didn't work, you have time to change. But the beauty of the American system is the ability to spawn innovation and also not to completely destroy people who fail, right? So take a risk and hopefully you don't fail, but if you fail, don't worry about it. Start over again. Good luck to both of you, and maybe we'll see you here this summer.
Of course.